I am so excited to finally share with you how I fixed up this Duncan Fife dining room table. You've seen me already fix up the buffet as well as the chairs that went along with the table. And like the buffet and chairs, the dining room table has a lot of damage. I'm telling you right now, I will be painting it. And if that is offensive to you, then maybe look at one of my other videos I've posted. The tabletop had deep gouges, missing veneer. This leaf had the veneer pulling away, but the biggest problem I had was that this foot on the pedestal had started to pull out. The table didn't stand straight, it was lopsided. But look at those brass feet, oh my goodness. This is a little longer than usual, so sit back and enjoy. I turned the table upside down and you can see how wobbly these pedestals are. And look at that new board. That's new. You can tell someone has tried to fix this table before I owned it. I immediately unscrewed those pedestals, took them off to see what I could do to improve the structure. This one is secure. I am going to hammer that in a little more. That one's fine. But this one, you can tell someone has attempted to repair it. I'll drill some new holes and add additional screws. All right, that's not going anywhere. Pretty solid. I'll do the same thing on the other side, and then we're going to address these sad legs. There was a lot of glue that someone had tried to use to fix this, and I knew I was going to have to put in more glue, so it was very important I remove the old. I used a heat gun and some pliers to pick out as much of that old glue as I possibly could. And then I used an all-purpose tool to wedge open an area for more glue. No doubt there's going to be lots of messy glue, and I'll clean that up momentarily. While the glue was drying, I went ahead and took these caps off the feet and then also vacuumed and cleaned what I could. These are brass and they will clean up beautifully. I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like. This looks so much better. But I am wondering if I need to put in 1 or 2 screws to see if I can tighten it up. Wow. I also felt it was necessary to further secure it by putting a screw in here. I'm going to drill just a little bit with a bigger drill bit so that I could be sure to countersink the screw in when I put it in. Okay. Now that it's countersunk, I took some plastic wood and I filled it in. I might need to put a little bit more in there in the morning because it might shrink a little bit. But when I go to scuff sand the piece and I sand that smooth, you'll never know it's there. It is totally secure. I am going to fill this little opening right here with a little bit of paintable caulk. It's going to come out white, but this table is being painted. It'll be fine. I want to make repairs to this leg and the other before I call it quits for the day. I'm using Quickwood, which is a 2-part epoxy. You need this all together until you have one blended color. All right. You know, it's interesting because this clearly was a repair prior to me having this. Someone put a metal shim in there prior to me having this. So This piece has had a lot of repairs to it even before I got it. So there's a big missing chunk of wood here that was in the drawer when I brought home the buffet. So we're going to use my favorite product. It's new to me. I just used it on the buffet the other day. So what I'm going to do is put the AC glue on that one piece. Then you spray the accelerator on the other side, which is here. You have to be careful on how you place it because once you place it, it sticks. And then you hold on to it for a minute and it's in. It's the following day, so I'm out here trying to sand down and shape the areas that I have patched with quickwood and with wood filler. I'm finding it's easier to do it by hand than with my electric sander, so I'm using some forms that I've wrapped sandpaper around. I then used a 180 grit sand pad to smooth out the dings and scuff sand the base of the table. Since I had sanded it down to bare wood in places, and because mahogany is notorious for bleeding, I sprayed the piece with clear shellac. And then I gave it a good wiping and started to paint it with my favorite black, Sherwin-Williams Caviar. Painting with a sprayer is so fast. I'm going to show you a little bit in real time of how quickly that paint went on the legs. It's the next day. I'm getting ready to put on a second coat. If you recall, I wasn't going to prime other than the clear shellac, and it's very evident where I had sanded down to bare wood. So what I'm going to do is spray on a second coat and see how that looks. If it still looks funky after the second coat, then I'll probably put some more shellac on, but we'll see. So a few days have passed. I'm now back to working on the dining room table. There are 2 coats on it now, and I noticed in the first and the second coat that the paint revealed more and more dings that I didn't know were there to begin with. And I don't know what the story is about this collection of furniture, the table, the chairs, and the buffet that I've worked on, but they're all in pretty bad shape. It's from 1947, and I understand that furniture that old will have some imperfections, but these were bad. I think it's as good as it's gonna get. I'm gonna go ahead and paint the third and final coat on the legs, and then I'll be able to start working on the top. So I've run into a snag. I discovered that the leaf that came with the table is very warped. I can't use it. So I found this one in my stash. It's too long, however, it is solid wood, so I will be able to trim it. I also need to modify it because the original leaf has a narrow metal piece. that fits into the holes here, but the parts on my leaf are much thicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these off, all 3 of them. And then I'm going to drill a hole in those areas small enough to clamp around that little metal piece. I cut both ends with my skill saw, and then Kevin helped me dry fit the leaf in place just to make sure I had trimmed it correctly. Once that looked good, I started to sand the sides to make them flush with the rest of the tabletop. I stripped the yellow paint off the leaf with some good chemical stripper. That is fantastic. I remember painting it with a very inexpensive latex. It was back in the day. So latex paint does come up rather easily. I then used a fine steel wool pad and some mineral spirits to remove any residual paint and to deactivate the stripper. What I just started doing off camera is I took a 220 grit pad and started lightly sanding the top of the table. There are a ton of scratches, some deep, others not. So I've started filling in the deep ones with a little bit of wood putty. But this table was in a thrift store for several weeks and nobody wanted it. And in fact, I've gone online to see what tables like this and chairs are selling for on Facebook Marketplace. People can't sell them, even those in pristine shape. So, having said all that, I'm painting the top. So the paint technique I'm using is forgiving, so I'm not too concerned about some of these scratches, but I do feel I'm gonna try to sand a little bit more, see if I can smooth them out. Let me show you what I have so far. Now the surface of the table is very smooth, while the leaf that I repurposed from another table is very rough. So I purchased some of this, and I purchased satin instead of the matte, which I usually get, to hopefully fill in some of the grain, make it a little more smooth, and plus I thought it might help prevent any bleeding on the first coat of paint that I put on, and I'll explain more later. While that was drying, I went indoors and boiled equal parts water and vinegar to clean the feet. That worked really well, but I also scrubbed it down with a little bit of Barkeeper's Friend and then even Brasso. Oh my goodness, they came out beautiful. But you can't forget the nails that you used to put those in place. So I want to show you the difference in that. Look at that, the difference between too dirty and too clean. When I went back outside, everything had dried, so I used a very fine sand pad to lightly sand. I wiped it off. Excellent. Yep. It has a uniform surface now, all the way throughout, so it's ready for paint. I'm going to paint it, but I'm going to give it a paint technique that looks like natural wood grain. Instead of using a yellowy beige undertone, I'm going to start with a light gray. This is Gray Mist by Rethunk Junk. It really is more taupe than it is gray, but it's a good combination of both. I'm going to use this for 2 reasons. I did not prime the tabletop. All I did was spray that satin clear coat on top just to make all the wood surfaces uniform. And so I'm using Rethunk Junk because it'll stick to anything without a primer. So that's one reason. The other reason is this color closely resembles the fabric that I used to cover the dining room chairs. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply this to the top. I'm not gonna worry about brush stroke marks because that'll just help give that wood grain look and texture. So I am going to apply it with a brush It might take 2 coats, not so sure, but I'm definitely gonna put on 1 coat today. The following day, I painted a 2nd coat. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is apply this brown glaze. It's a Rust-Oleum color called Java Brown. I have a designated brush. You've seen me do this before. I'm simply going to brush it on. Doesn't matter how pretty it is. Just need to get it on. And what I figured I would do is do the leaf first, put it into the table, and then do both sides of the table to make sure the striations and depth of the glaze are compatible with the leaf. It's very dense and it's very soft. And you simply go in one direction. There we go. The glaze is slow drying, so you have time to manipulate it and to brush it to give it that grain look. Remember those brush marks I mentioned in the paint? They're going to help create that grain look as well. Okay. This is a wallpaper brush I picked up from Goodwill. It's one of my favorites. It simply gives a different texture. It's scratching off that glaze differently because it's a more coarse bristle rather. That's not bad. I'll give you a better view. Kevin helped me carefully set the leaf in place so that I could use it as reference and more easily recreate the same wood tone on the rest of the table. A couple days later, I returned to the table and I sprayed on a total of 3 coats of polyurethane, lightly sanding and dusting in between each coat to assure it was a smooth finish on the top. And then I replaced those capped feet and she was done. She is beautiful. I cannot wait to hear what you think about it. Please leave me a comment below.